In 43 years behind this bench, I have seen a lot. I have seen millionaires cry and beggars stand tall. But I want to tell you about one morning in my courtroom that I will never, ever forget. It was the morning a quiet man in worn-out shoes walked through my door and reminded every single person in that room what dignity truly looks like. And I want to tell you about the other man who walked in that same morning, dripping in gold, carrying nothing but arrogance, and left that courtroom with something he never expected to receive. Are you ready for this one? Because I promise you, if you watch this all the way through, you are going to feel something real. Hit that subscribe button right now if you believe every single person who walks into a courtroom deserves to be treated like a human being. Every single one. Now let me tell you what happened. The case file read, Case number 2024 CV 4471. Defendant, Miguel Ernesto Santos, age 58. Address on Broad Street, Providence, Rhode Island. Charges, failure to yield at an intersection and alleged reckless operation of a motor vehicle on Route 6 near the Plainfield Pike Junction. Date of incident, September 28, 2024. Time of incident, 6:14 p.m. I read every word twice. Something about the file felt different. There was a note attached, written by Officer James Kowalski, badge number due 87. The note said, and I remember this clearly, Defendant has limited English proficiency, requests interpreter. Those 5 words told me everything I needed to know about who Miguel Santos was. He did not ask for a lawyer. He did not ask for a postponement. He did not try to play games with the system. He just asked for someone who could help him understand. That is the most honest thing a person can do inside a courtroom. Now, before I tell you about Miguel, let me tell you about the other man connected to this case, because every story about goodness also has a shadow in it. And the shadow that walked into my courtroom that morning had a name, Brandon Whitfield, 27 years old. Son of Whitfield Property Group CEO Gerald Whitfield, whose company manages over $42 million in real estate along the east side of Providence. Brandon had filed a counter-complaint against Miguel, claiming that Miguel's vehicle had struck his car and caused $2,800 in damage to his bumper. Brandon arrived at my courtroom at 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the 9 o'clock call. I know this because I was already on the bench when he pushed through the double doors like he owned the building. I want you to picture what I saw. Brandon Whitfield was wearing a slim-cut charcoal blazer from Giorgio Armani, a white dress shirt open at the collar, dark jeans, and a pair of Louis Vuitton Archlight sneakers that I later learned retail for over $1,100. Around his wrist was a Rolex Daytona in stainless steel and yellow gold. On his belt, I could clearly see the orange stitching of a Hermes H-buckle. He walked like a man who has never been told no in his life. He had his phone out. He was texting in my courtroom before the session had even officially started. My bailiff, Tommy Fontaine, had to ask him twice to put the phone away. Brandon looked up at Tommy and said with a smile that had no warmth in it at all, "Relax, man. I'll be out of here in 10 minutes. I wrote that down. Then Miguel Santos walked in. Miguel came through the same double doors, but he opened them carefully like he was afraid of making noise. He was wearing dark work pants, the kind that still hold the crease even when they are old and washed many times. His shirt was a plain blue-collared shirt, tucked in, ironed. His shoes were black leather, scuffed at the toe. He was a small man, maybe 5 feet 6 inches, with silver at his temples and deep lines in his face that only come from years of hard work and harder worry. He held a manila folder in both hands in front of him, like it was something precious. Inside that folder, I would later learn, was every piece of paper he had gathered since the day of the incident, receipts, a hand-drawn map, a letter written partly in Spanish and partly in broken English, explaining what happened that evening on Route 6. He looked at my bench and he nodded at me, a respectful, quiet nod. Then he looked around the room, a little lost, and my clerk pointed him to the defendant's table. He sat down, placed the folder on the table, folded his hands on top of it, and waited. I have been a judge for a long time. I can read a room, and I could already feel the difference between these two men without a single word being spoken. One of them came to perform. The other came to tell the truth. I called court interpreter Maria Reyes to take her seat beside the defendant's table. Maria has worked with my court for 11 years. She is one of the best in the state. When she sat down next to Miguel and said something to him quietly in Spanish, I watched his shoulders drop just slightly, not in defeat, in relief, because finally someone was going to understand him. I opened the session at 9:03 a.m. and I said, Mr. Santos, I want you to know something before we begin. This is your courtroom just as much as it is mine. You will be heard clearly. You take your time. Maria is here for you. Maria translated, and Miguel Santos looked up at me with eyes that were steady and full of something I can only describe as grateful exhaustion. He had been carrying this alone for 16 days. I asked him to tell me in his own words what happened on September 28th at 6:14 p.m. on Route 6. Through Maria, Miguel told me this. He had finished his shift at the Hasbro Children's Research Hospital, where he has worked as a night custodial staff member for 9 years, employee number H22241. He works the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift 5 nights a week. But on that particular evening, he had come in early for a voluntary extra shift to cover for a sick colleague, working from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. He was driving home in his 2009 Honda Civic, plate number RI 4 Echo 773, heading west on Route 6. He was tired. 13 hours on his feet on hospital floors, and he had one more stop to make before he could rest. He had to pick up his daughter from his neighbor's apartment. His daughter's name is Lucia. She is 9 years old. Lucia has been fighting acute lymphoblastic leukemia since she was 7. She has treatment every other Thursday at Hasbro Children's Hospital, the same hospital where her father mops the floors at 3 a.m. so she can have insurance. When Maria translated that detail about Lucia, the courtroom went completely silent. Miguel said that as he was approaching the Route 6 intersection at Plainfield Pike, a dark vehicle came up on his left at very high speed, cut across his lane without signaling, and struck the rear quarter panel of his Civic. Miguel braked hard and pulled to the right shoulder. He said he sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, trying to calm down. When he got out to check the damage, a young man was already out of the other car, screaming at him, not asking if he was okay, screaming. And the words that young man used, Miguel told me, he did not understand all of them, but he understood the tone. He said, through Maria, I have heard that tone before, Judge. I know what it means. I knew exactly what he meant. Officer Kowalski arrived at the scene at 6:31 p.m. According to the incident report, filed at 7:12 p.m. that evening, the officer noted the collision point, took statements from both parties, and issued a citation to Miguel Santos for failure to yield. Brandon Whitfield was not cited. No field sobriety test was administered to either driver. No independent witnesses were documented at the scene. When I looked up from the file and asked Brandon Whitfield to give his account, he straightened up in his chair, adjusted his Rolex, and started talking like he was explaining something obvious to someone who probably would not understand. He said, Your Honor, this is pretty simple. This guy pulled out without looking and hit my car. I swerved to avoid him. His bumper caught my rear end. The damage to my Huracan was almost $3,000. He paused to let that word sink in. Huracan, a Lamborghini Huracan. He wanted me to know what kind of car he drove. I noted the word. I noted the pause. I asked him, Mr. Whitfield, what speed were you traveling at the time of the collision? He shrugged. He actually shrugged in my courtroom. I don't know. Normal highway speed, maybe 60, 65. The speed limit on that section of Route 6 is 45 miles per hour, I said. Are you saying you were traveling 15 to 20 miles over the limit? He smiled. That same cold smile from before. I mean, I don't know exactly. Everyone goes faster than 45 on that road. You think you know where this is going? I bet you think you can see the ending from here. But I promise you, the next part of this story is something I could not have predicted myself. Stay with me, because what comes next is the reason I am still talking about this case today. I asked Brandon to show me any documentation he had. Insurance information, photographs of his vehicle, anything. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He had photos on his phone of the Lamborghini's bumper damage. He also had the repair invoice from Exotic Auto Body on Atwells Avenue in Providence. I looked at the invoice, $2,840 for a bumper on a car that costs over $200,000. I set the invoice down, then I turned back to Miguel. I asked him through Maria what documentation he had brought with him. He opened his manila folder carefully, like I said, like it was something precious, and he began laying items on the table one by one. First, the police report, his copy, then his insurance card, current and valid, then 3 photographs he had taken himself at the scene on his phone, then a hand-drawn diagram of the intersection showing the position of both cars with arrows and labels in Spanish, then the letter he had written, translated by his neighbor's daughter, explaining the events. And finally, at the bottom of the folder, a single item that he slid toward Maria without saying anything, a hospital appointment card, Lucia Santos, Hasbro Children's Hospital, Oncology Department, appointment date October 17, 2024, next Thursday. He had brought his daughter's appointment card to court with him, not as evidence, just because he carries it everywhere, because she is why he works, she is why he shows up. Maria looked at that card for a moment, then she looked at me. I looked at it too. And then I made a decision that I will stand behind for the rest of my life. I said to Miguel, through Maria, "Sir, I see you brought some photographs. I would like to look at them." He nodded and pushed them toward my bailiff. The 3 photographs were taken on an older phone, slightly blurry but clear enough. The first showed the front of his Honda Civic right front bumper area. The second showed the side of his car near the left rear. The third photograph showed something that stopped me cold. It showed the road surface behind both vehicles. And on that road surface you could clearly see 2 long skid marks, but they were in the wrong place. If Miguel had failed to yield and pulled into traffic, causing Brandon to swerve, the skid marks would be on the right side of the lane. These skid marks were on the left. They started from the far left lane and veered hard to the right. That meant someone had been in the left lane moving very fast and then braked and swerved right into Miguel's lane. Miguel did not cause this accident. Brandon Whitfield did. I looked at Brandon Whitfield. He was looking at his phone under the table. I said, "Mr. Whitfield, would you put your phone on the desk where I can see it, please?" He looked up slowly. His jaw tightened just slightly. He put the phone face down on the desk. I said, "Face up, please." He flipped it face up. And here is where this morning became something that went beyond a simple traffic case. I called a brief recess at 9:47 a.m. and asked my clerk to run a quick background check on Brandon Whitfield through the state DMV and our court database. What came back 12 minutes later made Officer Mullaney walk it to my bench with a look on his face like he was carrying something hot. In the past 18 months, Brandon Whitfield had received 4 speeding citations in the state of Rhode Island. 2 of them had been dismissed. The court records showed that both dismissals came on the same day, filed under motion by one attorney Lawrence Carver of Carver and Associates on Weybosset Street in Providence. Attorney Carver also happens to represent Gerald Whitfield's property group in 2 ongoing zoning disputes with the city. I am not saying anything improper happened. I'm just telling you what the records showed. Now here is the part that nobody in that courtroom was prepared for. Stay right here because I need you to hear what I am about to say. And if this story has hit you in the chest the way it hit me, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were sitting in my chair that morning. Because what I found next tested everything I believe about the law. I thought about the Lamborghini Huracan. I thought about the Rolex Daytona. I thought about the Hermes belt and the Louis Vuitton shoes. And I thought about Miguel Santos mopping hospital floors for $9 above minimum wage so his daughter could have health insurance. I came back to the bench at 10:09 a.m. The courtroom had a different energy in it now. I could feel it. Even Brandon Whitfield seemed to sense that something had shifted, though he could not have known what. He sat up a little straighter. He had put his phone away without being asked this time. I asked Miguel, through Maria, one more question. I said, "Mr. Santos, on the evening of September 28th, after the incident and after Officer Kowalski left the scene, did anything else happen that you feel I should know about?" Miguel thought for a moment, then he nodded slowly. He spoke, and Maria translated. "The young man, he took out his phone before the police came. He pointed it at me and he was laughing. He said something I didn't understand, but I understood that he was making a video of me. I was shaking. I had just had an accident. I was scared, and he was laughing and making a video." Brandon Whitfield's jaw moved, just slightly. I said, "Mr. Whitfield, did you record video of Mr. Santos at the scene of the accident on September 28th? A pause. "I took a video of the cars," he said, "for insurance purposes. And did you post any content related to this incident on social media?" Another pause, longer this time. "I don't think that's relevant to this proceeding," I said very calmly. "I will determine what is relevant in this courtroom." My clerk had been doing what good clerks do. He had already located a public Instagram post from an account with the handle @BrandonWPVD, which I confirmed was Brandon Whitfield's account. It had 183,400 followers. The post had been made on the evening of September 28th at 8:17 p.m., approximately 2 hours after the accident. It showed a short video clip. The caption read, and I'm going to read it exactly as it was written. "Almost got hit by an illegal who can't drive or speak American LOL. My Lambo is worth more than his whole life story. Stay in your lane, buddy, literally." The video showed Miguel Santos standing by his Honda Civic on the shoulder of Route 6, looking shaken and confused, trying to talk to Officer Kowalski and struggling with the language barrier, while Brandon filmed and laughed in the background. That post had over 4,200 likes. I want you to sit with that for a second. Over 4,000 people liked a video of a man being humiliated on the worst evening of his year, a man who works 13-hour shifts at a children's cancer ward, a man whose little girl is fighting leukemia. Over 4,000 people clicked a button and said, "Yes, I enjoy this. I have been on the bench for 43 years. I have controlled my voice in this room more times than I can count. I controlled it that morning too, but it required everything I had." I looked at Brandon Whitfield and I said, "Young man, do you have any idea who is sitting at that table?" He looked at me with a flicker of something, not quite fear, not yet, something closer to confusion, like he genuinely could not understand why I was asking him this question with such weight. He said, "It's the guy who hit my car?" I said, "That man's name is Miguel Ernesto Santos. He came to this country from El Salvador 22 years ago. He has worked legally in this state every single one of those years. He has paid his taxes. He has raised a daughter on his own since his wife, Elena Santos, passed away from complications after surgery 3 years ago. He works nights at a hospital that your father's foundation once held a fundraiser for. His daughter, Lucia, has leukemia. She is 9 years old. He carries her appointment card in a folder because he never wants to forget why he works so hard. He drove to this courthouse today alone in the car you damaged, wearing his best shirt, because he trusts that this system will be fair to him. And you made a video of him when he was frightened and helpless, and you called him an illegal, and you put it on the internet and laughed, and 4,000 people agreed with you." I let that sit. Brandon Whitfield looked at his hands. Then he said something that shocked even me. He said quietly but clearly enough to be heard, "Look, Judge, I understand you want to make a point, but at the end of the day, my time is valuable. My father's attorneys are going to have this whole thing sorted out by next week anyway. This is a parking court. No offense, but you people don't exactly make history in here. You people, you people. If you are still watching this right now, I need you to know something. This moment is the reason I do this work, not for the big cases, not for the cameras. For this moment right here when a person decides that this room, my room, the room that belongs to every citizen of this city, is beneath them. That is the moment when justice becomes personal. And if you believe that every single person, rich or poor, old or young, born here or not, deserves to be treated with dignity inside a court of law, then let's build something together, like this video, and let us show the world that justice still matters to people who are paying attention." Before I could respond to Brandon Whitfield's comment, the double doors of my courtroom opened. Special Agent Patricia Lynn of the FBI walked in. She is a compact woman in her late 40s, wearing a dark navy suit, carrying a leather document wallet. She walked to my clerk, showed identification, and asked to approach the bench. I granted it. She handed me a sealed document. Case reference FBI FC 2024-0097. I read the top portion. It was a notification that Brandon Whitfield was being formally named as a co-subject in the federal investigation into Whitfield Property Group's misappropriation of $2.3 million in federal affordable housing funds. The document noted that several large personal purchases made in the past 8 months, including a vehicle purchased on March 4, 2024, for $218,000, were under review as potentially fraudulent expenditures. March 4th, I looked at the Lamborghini photos on my desk. I looked at the Rolex on Brandon Whitfield's wrist. Special Agent Lynn took a seat in the gallery. She did not say a word. She did not have to. Her presence in my courtroom said everything. Brandon Whitfield had gone white. That particular shade of white that very confident people turn when they suddenly realize the floor is not as solid as they thought. He looked toward the door. He looked at Agent Lynn. He looked at his phone, which he clearly wanted to pick up and could not. His left knee started moving up and down under the desk. I watched the Rolex catch the light as his hand trembled slightly. I turned to Miguel Santos. I spoke directly to him and waited for Maria to translate each line. I said, "Mr. Santos, I have reviewed the photographic evidence in this case. The skid marks documented in your photographs are inconsistent with the police report's initial finding of failure to yield on your part. The physical evidence suggests that the other vehicle was traveling in the left lane at a speed significantly above the limit and changed lanes abruptly, resulting in contact with your vehicle. I am dismissing all charges against you effective immediately. Case number 2024 CV4471 is closed." Maria translated. Miguel sat very still for a moment. Then he pressed his lips together and nodded. His eyes were bright. He did not cry. He was too dignified for that. He just nodded, over and over, like he was storing the words somewhere safe inside himself. I said, "Wait, I am not finished." He looked up. I said, "The counter-complaint filed by Mr. Whitfield is not only dismissed, it is referred to the state attorney's office for review of the circumstances under which the original citation was issued, including whether the responding officer received any improper communication prior to writing that citation." I turned to Brandon Whitfield. I said, "Mr. Whitfield, I am going to speak to you plainly, and I am going to ask you to listen very carefully, because what I say next will matter to you for a very long time." He was still. The knee had stopped moving. I said, "You came into this room today carrying every advantage this society can offer a young man. Good name, good clothes, good lawyer on speed dial. And you used all of that to try to crush a man who had none of it. You filmed him when he was frightened. You mocked him to your audience. You used a word, illegal, as if it were a weapon, as if a man's legal status determines his worth as a human being. I am the grandson of immigrants who came to this country through the port of Providence with nothing but their names and their faith. My grandfather worked in a textile mill for 30 years. He did not always speak perfect English either. And every single day that I sit on this bench, I carry his memory with me. So when you stood in my room and called this man an illegal and called his life worth less than your automobile, you were not just insulting him. You were insulting every person in this country who ever came from somewhere else and built something good with their hands. I picked up my gavel. I said, "The civil judgment in this matter is entered in favor of Miguel Santos. Mr. Whitfield, you are ordered to pay the full cost of repairs to Mr. Santos's vehicle, estimated at $1,120 as documented in the repair quote he brought with him today. In addition, recognizing the emotional and reputational harm caused by your public social media post, I am referring this matter to civil court for a hearing on damages with my personal written recommendation to the presiding judge." Brandon opened his mouth. I raised my hand. He closed it. I said, "Furthermore, I am ordering you to complete 200 hours of community service, not at a charity gala, not at a fundraiser where you can take photographs, 200 hours at Hasbro Children's Hospital in the Custodial and Support Services Division, under the supervision of the department manager. You will learn the name of every colleague in that department. You will do the work they do. You will see what it looks like to give everything you have and ask for very little in return." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Agent Lynn was writing something in her notebook. Brandon Whitfield sat there in his $1,000 shoes in my courtroom, and for the first time in what I suspect was a very long time, he had absolutely nothing to say. I brought the gavel down. And then I did one more thing. I came down from the bench. I do not do this often. My knees are not what they used to be, but I walked to the defendant's table where Miguel Santos was sitting, still holding his folder, and I extended my hand. He stood up. He shook my hand. His grip was firm and warm and honest. I said to him directly, so Maria did not even need to translate, "You are a good man, Mr. Santos. This country is lucky to have you." Maria translated anyway because she is thorough and professional and kind. And Miguel Santos, this small, tired man with silver in his hair and a sick daughter's appointment card in his folder, looked at me and said, in careful, deliberate English, the best English he could find in that moment, "Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much." 3 words. Thank you very much. He saved them up. He used them when they counted. I have thought about that moment almost every day since October 14th. You know what justice really is? It is not a big dramatic speech. It is not a gavel strike that echoes through a marble hall. Justice is the look on a man's face when he finally knows that someone listened. That is it. That is all it is. After 43 years behind this bench, that is the only definition I trust. Thank you for watching this all the way to the end. I mean that sincerely. In a world full of noise and distraction, you chose to spend 12 minutes in my courtroom, and that tells me something about who you are. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of someone you love, whoever had to fight just to be heard, please share this video with one person today, just one. Because the best thing we can do for justice is talk about it out loud. Subscribe if you have not already and stay close, because my next story is about a decorated Army veteran, a hit-and-run driver, and a confession that happened right here on my bench at 11:22 a.m. on a Friday morning that nobody in that room will ever forget. You are not going to want to miss it.